You're listening to the Parent Pod podcast by Gymboree Play and Music with Adonica Shaw, a weekly conversation about early childhood development topics for parents with children ages 0 to 5. While the content of this show is meant to be informative, it is not meant to replace the guidance of your physician, therapist, or pediatrician.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Parent Pod podcast by Gymboree Play and Music. I'm your host, Adonica Shaw. Today, we are joined by Sarah Komers, who is the founder of the popular blog and e-commerce website, Mom Culture. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Thank you for sharing your time with us today. So I know that I know all of the amazing and wonderful things that you've done with your blog and e-commerce platform, but would you please share for the guests a little bit more about yourself and your background and where the idea of Mom Culture came about?
Of course. So I started Mom Culture back in 2013 after the birth of my last baby. I'm a hairdresser by trade, so being creative just was something that I thrive off of, but I kind of let it take a back seat during my motherhood journey. And after I had him, a good friend of mine talked to me about just purpose and what I wanted. And it had been so long since anyone had actually asked me that. And I'm like, I don't know, but I just miss being creative. So I had sewed during my last pregnancy and made all these things. And my husband suggested, why don't you sell them? He's like, you're clearly passionate about it and people like what you're doing. And so that's honestly how it kind of came around. I made these handmade baby items and sold them to local friends. And then one day my husband just said, let's throw a website up. Let's just see what you can do with it. And that's really how it grew from my kitchen table to now 115,000 followers on Instagram and, a small celebrity following. It's just insane how this little idea became so much more.
Oh my goodness, that's so inspiring. So in terms of the baby items that you made, like, are you a seamstress by trade? Do you have somebody else in your family that kind of showed you how to do this? Or is this just an amazing skill that you had and developed over the course of the years?
It was a skill. I had always wanted to sew. Originally, I wanted to go to fashion design school, but just it never happened for me. So I did not learn to sew until I was 30. For my 30th birthday, my husband bought me a little sewing machine. And I did online tutorials and I bought patterns and I took a total of 3 Joanne sewing classes. So I am not a seamstress by trade. So I just was self-taught and with the help of a few classes.
Oh my goodness. Like, I've always wanted to sew, but I love being in Joann's. And so, for example, like during the, fall, I've always gone in there to get the items to make the no-sew blankets.
Yes.
Those are they're easy to make, they're fun, and then I can make them for my kids. What would you say is the most popular item, or which items really thrust you into the limelight, particularly with your celebrity following?
So I went from the handmade baby market to, I designed the first graphic shirts with a collaboration with another shop. And it was kind of there that I was like, I really like this graphic apparel. And we sent a couple of them out to like Tori Spelling and the Kardashians. So that was probably how we first got some notoriety with our Cali Cub. And also doing graphic apparel didn't require as much time. And at that time, I had 2 kids in school and I was nursing a baby. So it was so hard to find sewing time. So I kind of shifted my gears into more apparel that I could source out.
That's like, it seems like it's one of those like overnight success stories. But of course, we all know there's so many more days and hours and years that go into launching a brand and a company before it makes it big. And so that's just a tremendous jump and leap to have that opportunity to kind of pivot how you were able to produce your apparel and then even getting it into the hands of some of the most well-known celebrities and entrepreneurs and mompreneurs even on the planet. And so I love that this has kind of come about very organically. In looking at your website, I did notice that kind of the culture or the mom culture that you've built a lot of your company from revolves around this concept of loving unconditionally. Can you tell us more about that?
I think for me, it does. I believe that, mothers really, truly, we love unconditionally. I had a kind of turbulent upbringing. So my mother suffers from mental illness. So I felt in my motherhood, I knew I wanted to do things different and break cycles. And it's very hard and it's required a lot on my part. So for me, that really was the forefront for our brand is I wanted to point that out, that moms, you can break cycles. You can love your children unconditionally. We give so much of ourselves over. So like with our mother with all your heart, that's really, truly what I believe. I feel that we go all in and just give so much of ourselves, especially in the early years with kids. That the first 5 years, as are so important.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, with my first two, I definitely I was all in for those 5 years. I am not going to say I enjoyed every moment of it because there's the struggles, but they got so much of me. I just gave it my all.
Oh my goodness, it's so sweet. Do you think that did they notice what you were doing with the company when you started it? Have they kind of picked up on the entrepreneurial traits and habits that you've created since the inception of your company?
Oh, very much. My daughter was 6 when I started, and she actually sewed, I hate to say this, but better than I did. She had started sewing in kindergarten, and she had way more classes than I did. So, she has really gotten the entrepreneurial bug. She sews her own bows and sells slime, and she just loves it. She's so supportive, and it's been really nice to see, when we get good features and stuff, especially people that she knows. I mean, she just gets tickled pink. One of the cast of Fuller House wore our shirt, and the reboot of Full House had come out, and she was like, "Mom, that's the coolest thing. Gina's wearing your shirt." So it's been so fun to see. And my baby has been with me literally from the beginning. Like I nursed him at my sewing table. Every time I would do a listing or a post, he was right there with me. So he has this really cute ownership over it. He, he comes into the office with me and he knows the ins and outs of the company, and he's only 7 now. So definitely.
Oh my goodness.
It's been neat to see.
Well, it sounds like you're raising very well-rounded future entrepreneurs that have the benefit of having their mom that's all in, but then also having a mom that is making great strides in the industry. What pieces of advice would you give to other mothers who might have, little children, and I'd say 5 and younger, who are interested in creating some type of a work-life balance or trying to kind of venture out to even start with like a side hustle, even though that they've got a small child?
I get asked this one a lot. I advocate that there's not a perfect balance. I really don't believe that it exists. I do believe, though, that moms, it's great to have something for yourself. I think for me, it really filled this hole. I loved motherhood, but I felt something was missing, and this was that missing piece. So I say go for it. I was able to start it with, very little fabric at my kitchen table and turn it into, what it is today. And, we're still growing. I say just start. That's my biggest tip. Just start. Whatever your passion is, follow it. And it will evolve and grow and change as your children grow. I started with baby items, and then I went into toddler shirts, and then mommy and me sets, and, more things now geared towards the older kids. So your brand will evolve as your children grow, and they will grow with your brand.
So I'm taking notes as I'm listening to you. So if they were to start and get going, it sounds like, if they keep the momentum up, the energy to continue moving forward with whatever the passion project is, then they should be able to make it work for themselves. During your time as a mompreneur, were there any resources or support groups that you took advantage of to help you kind of develop yourself professionally? And were there any mommy groups even that you used maybe for your first two that you really took advantage of in terms of being all in as a mom and connecting to your littles?
Yeah, I think, I took your guys' classes with my first, and I absolutely loved it. I actually met some of my long-term mommy friends through a Gymboree class. So I think connecting with other moms is just so, so important. I actually wrote a blog about that, how I had built my mom group over the course of the years, like picking people up from Gymboree classes or a stroller strides class or, a local library class. I think it's so important to have positive females in your corner. And for me, for business, I will say for starting out, I think Jenna Kutcher is amazing. She provides so much knowledge for women. Rachel Hollis is another one that I love. There's so much available content out there to help you get started in your side hustle, but at the end, you have to be the one willing to do it. And it's hard. So many women aren't ready to put themselves out there, but they know they want to start something. That's always why I advocate just start. We started with a $29 website. And I was terrified. Believe it or not, I was like, how am I going to pay this? And my husband's like, sell one. He's like, sell one item and you've paid for it for the month. And it was just this mindset of fear. And I think fear truly kills so many dreams.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So this is like a special treat that you were actually a Gymboree playing music mom. How did your children adapt to the classes? What were some of the things that you learned about parenting and about your child's early childhood development milestones by going to the classes?
I think for us, the early childhood, I think the interaction, the classes, I always say they're more for the parent than they are for the kid, which I know that's not true. But for me, it was my social hour of getting out and, meeting someone. It gave me an excuse to put myself together. But the kids get so much value out of the classes. They learn, how to start functioning in society. And that's a huge part. I mean, my daughter went to every single class and she was so well-rounded by the time she started school. She knew how to share and she knew, how to put things back and clean up. I mean, there's so much in early childhood development that you get out of taking classes. So they're so good for both mom and baby. And your bubbles. I'm sorry. I just have to plug those bubbles.
Yes, our world famous bubbles.
They were world famous in my house for many, many years. And it's so funny. My daughter still talks about them. She's like, do you remember the little bubbles that lasted forever in the air? I mean, the bubbles made the class.
Yeah, so our bubble oodle packs are certainly something that we're well known for. And believe it or not, like we get requests all the time. Like we sell them on our website, of course, but people will message on Facebook and Instagram like years later searching for bubbles. And that is one of the signature items that is traditionally made Gymboree playing music what it is, and certainly something that children do not forget because they do last forever in the air. And
it's that lasting childhood memory for sure. She's 13 and still talks about them.
Yeah, I mean, you can't walk into like a Target or a Walmart and buy something that's comparable. I mean, you can, but it's just not the same. It's not the same as our bubble oodles. That's fun. I love that. In terms of where you see your business pivoting next, even though you've got a little and you've got two older children, what do you see kind of coming about in the future? Do you ever see yourself expanding even more or bringing other moms along on your journey?
I currently work with a good friend of mine who actually showed up at one of my kind of most overwhelming moments, and she's been with me now for almost 3 years. So I currently employ another mom, and I love that. I actually love providing jobs for women. It's been so important. We've got a bunch of freelance women that are awesome mothers that work for us. So that's been one of my greatest accomplishments, I feel like, providing jobs for other moms and them getting that fulfillment too, that they're doing something for themselves. Mm-hmm. As far as our next pivot, I've been thinking, especially during quarantine, about this. I've really found so much passion in advocacy work with mental maternal health, especially with just how I grew up. So I really see diving more into that in the next couple of years. I've been considering possibly a pivot into a nonprofit to help raise funds and awareness more for that, because I'm really finding passion with it. And like I said, as my brand has grown with my children and my motherhood journey has changed, that's been part of the change is finding that voice and, more fulfillment through that type of work.
I think it's tremendous that the conversations around maternal mental health are so much more prevalent now than they used to be. And that more women, families, companies are really willing to put that conversation on the forefront in terms of what maternal mental health looks like, what it is, and how to find help or seek resources if you happen to be a mom that is struggling with your mental health. But then also if you come from a family where you might have a lasting impact or effect of something that has happened to you during your childhood growing up, so that you find that balance and are able to sustain that balance as you move into motherhood yourself. What would you say, and I don't know if you have any organizations that you follow that do actually do the work around maternal mental health or that are actively driving these conversations, but do you have any recommendations for organizations or companies that other women can look into if they wanted to get more information on that particular topic?
Yes, of course. We have been so fortunate to get to work with so many amazing companies that are really trying, to make change, because we really need change to happen. And part of that change is the fact that people have conversations now. Motherhood Understood is one of my favorite platforms. The founder, Jen, suffered from severe PPA and PPD, and she's making it her life's work to help women. She has so many resources, and even now has resources for husbands, which I think is huge, that, husbands start being part of the conversation so they can recognize when maybe their wife, things aren't quite right. So she's a great resource. The Blue Dot Project is who I help raise awareness and funds for. They are trying to change legislation with Mom 2020 in Congress. So there is some amazing companies trying to make major strides. Also, Mom Genes. They are trying to find a genetic link through DNA so we can find a cure for PPA and PPD, or at least be able to identify who is going to be at risk. And I think that that's amazing, because there's not been any real studies. And, there definitely seems to be a link, and when there's sisters that have, both suffer from mental maternal health issues, there's got to be some genetics to it as well.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. It's quite interesting. We had Jen on the show a couple of episodes back. So,
oh, you did. She's amazing.
She is, and her story is phenomenal. So that's tremendous that that is somebody that you have mentioned. And then in terms of the Blue Dot Project, we have heard of them as well. And so we absolutely love the work that they're doing and find it to be so beneficial and helpful to young mommies who are trying to navigate through motherhood, whether it's their first or their third child.
It's so true, and that's the thing, it hits you, it can hit you at any time. And in my first, I didn't really recognize it, and I really solely relied on classes like yours for my mental health. I that is my only saving grace during that period of time. And that's sometimes all that women have. I didn't realize that other women had those thoughts because it wasn't part of the conversation anyone had. It was always just all the fun stuff about being a mom. And, when you're sitting there in classes like Gymboree and you're not maybe feeling that great, but everything else seems like it's great, it's really hard. You're so hard on yourself. So it's been nice to be part of the change. And these companies are just amazing what they're doing and giving women voices that they didn't have before.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for sharing that. I know that our classes certainly are aimed at, families who want to help their little one thrive through the first 5 years of life. But to your point, the classes are as much sometimes for the children as it is for the parents, and getting that opportunity to get out of the house and connect with other moms that are kind of going through the same thing, even though, it might just be for, 45 minutes to an hour every day or every week. That time you get kind of in fellowship and in speaking with other women who are going through a very similar life experience can be very soothing and extremely helpful as you're trying to navigate your own day-to-day.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, really, for me, the getting out once a week, those classes changed my mindset so much. And like I said, I collected some amazing women along the journey through going to classes that are still friends to this day.
Oh, goodness. Well, I know we're coming to the end of our episode, and so I just have two more questions for you. The first is books. Gymboree Plain Music has always traditionally released book recommendations for children, but through our podcast, we are looking to highlight book options for parents. And it can be any book that you can think of that has really impacted you as a parent or as a mompreneur, or just as somebody that is trying to improve themselves. Is there any book that you have in mind that you like to share with the audience that they can either purchase on Amazon or local bookstore that really has impacted you?
Probably the most recent one that impacted me, Rachel Hollis's Girl Wash Your Face. It was very relatable, just her journey and how she became the mompreneur that she is. I like her honesty. I think that it's a great book to start with, especially when, maybe you're second guessing yourself and your journey and desire to start a business. I loved everything about her book. And it was so relatable to me. And then I'm a big fan of Gretchen Rubin. I love her quote that the years are short. But as far as children, I'm trying to remember now my quote. I had it. The days are long, but the years are short. There we go. I love her writing, and I think that really embodies the parenthood journey, because when you're in it, in the thick of it, it feels like it's so long. But then now that I'm out of the early years of my motherhood, it went by so fast. So I think Gretchen Rubin is a great mantra for any parent to read.
Oh, thank you so much for those two recommendations. We'll certainly link them in the description box below. And then lastly, how can people find you?
So you can find us on Instagram at the Mom Culture. We have a great VIP Facebook group called Mom Culture Community. And that is really a place of complete safe space of sharing. We've got about 3,000 amazing women in there that share all day long. And we also have a fan page on Facebook, the Mom Culture.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we'll be able to link all of this information below. That way, if anybody has any further questions for you or wants to check out all of your amazing items on your platform and connect with other moms and dive into a mom community, irrespective of where you are in the United States, North America, it's just a tremendous resource to have to be able to dial in to other women. So thank you so much for sharing your story today and telling us a little bit about your journey from being a mom and then transitioning into entrepreneurship, and then what that kind of looked like for you and your family. To everyone listening at home, thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of the Parent Pod podcast. We look forward to sharing more life-changing stories and communicating with you on a regular basis through our podcast. We hope that you have a playful day.
To learn more about this week's episode or the content discussed in the episode, be sure to follow Gymboree Play and Music on Facebook.